to the official podcast at contentchampion.com. Join our heroic quest to discover truly epic content marketing. Introducing your host, the content champion himself, Loz James.
Hello again. Welcome to episode 45 of the Content Champion podcast. Thanks for listening. I really appreciate it. On the show this time, I'm talking with professional SEO Nick Eubanks about the system he uses to grow traffic on new websites to over 100,000 visitors a month in just 9 months. Not only that, but he's worked out how this process can be replicated. Author of the highly popular blog SEO Nick, Vice President of Digital Strategy at Traffic Safety Store, and formerly Managing Partner of Factor Media in Philadelphia, Nick is a wealth of knowledge on enterprise-level SEO, and it was a pleasure to have him as my guest on the show. Let's dive in. Thanks for coming on, Nick.
Thank you for having me.
A highly experienced SEO professional, you've consulted for blue-chip firms such as Morgan Stanley, Thomson Reuters and Discovery Communications, and specialise in driving high levels of qualified traffic that converts into higher revenue. Now, I first encountered your work through a superb post on your blog SEO Nick, entitled How to Grow a New Website to Over 100,000 Organic Visits per Month, which is the subject of today's call. Before we kick off, though, could you tell us a bit about how you got started in the SEO industry?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was when I was working at Morgan Stanley, my sophomore year of college, I was doing a lot of email, and this notion of beginning to optimize pages on the sites that we were building all these landing pages specifically for email campaigns, but the idea of trying to find a more sustainable base of traffic that we could use back then, especially for the terms that the Morgan Stanley brokerage that I was working for was targeting. These were very, very expensive cost per click terms. So, sort of started to experiment with how else can we get traffic to these pages to begin to generate, warm leads. And back in those days, this was not the Wild West of the mid-90s for SEO, but this was 2004. So, 11 years ago at this point, putting white text on a white background and shoving your keyword on the page 500 times wasn't working anymore, but it was still very easy to get the rankings you wanted back then. You just, you made sure that you built a bunch of pages on the site with complementary page titles, linked them all together, and then just went out and blasted anchor text from every direction. And it was fun to start to see how search rankings changed over time, over every year or two from then on, how things that were working no longer worked and how you had to sort of stay with the tide so you didn't get left behind.
And tell me a bit about your work now and what you're doing with your companies these days.
These days, all my time is taken up running my e-commerce company, Traffic Safety Store, and just really trying to continue to grow as the category leader in the traffic safety space. So it's a niche. I wouldn't call it a hyper niche. It's a niche business, but it's very different growing a brick and mortar company with real inventory and physical space and 30, 40 employees, as opposed to just growing a traffic-based company where everybody's remote and there's no physical office and you're not selling products that you can kick and throw.
Let's dive straight into your post about getting 100,000 visits per month. What struck me about this wasn't just that you achieved it in only 9 months, but that it's a model that's proved to be repeatable. Set us up with a background on this project and how it came about, please.
So that was an angel-funded project where the idea was not mine. I was approached and sort of hawked away from an agency that I had started back in 2008, in 2011. And it was, here I have this idea, sign all this non-compete and non-disclosure paperwork from a very smart software guy, and I want to build this thing. So after about 3-4 months of me and a couple other contract analysts that I had hired looking at the opportunity in Japan for this specific market niche, which was sort of the mobile device review space, we determined that there was an opportunity and that it was pretty big. And we set out starting to design the CMS that actually runs that site still to this day, is this internationalized review CMS. Based the entire set of requirements on a group of test sites that I built in WordPress. So built 10 WordPress websites to really test a couple different ideas about directory structure and see, did we have to focus more on the topics? Should the reviews roll up to the topics? Should the topics roll up to the categories? Should the categories roll up underneath the brand names? So really did a whole bunch of keyword testing in the forms of different sites and different architectures to figure out what we wanted to build that we thought would scale to support continuous organic traffic growth. And then ultimately that's what led us to designing the system that is on Toshibaca right now. biggest takeaway, I think, was learning how to manage a team that was learning Rails. So in 2011, I'm sure there's expert Rails developers all over the place, but there weren't really any here in Philadelphia that I had access to. So I found some people who were more polyglots, and everybody sort of set out to learn Ruby on Rails together. We made a crap ton of mistakes, and we broke a whole bunch of stuff. And end result, though, was a pretty decent CMS.
Okay, so your SEO model, the traffic generation model through SEO, focuses on three central tenets: a mathematical approach to keyword profit evaluation, an algorithmic analysis of on-page content architecture, and a traffic growth strategy centered on what you call pumpkin hacking. So let's go through these in order. Could you tell us about your keyword modeling process to start with?
Sure. That was the project that actually led me to design a keyword opportunity model. So, I mean, I know people have been trying to do this for a while, and mine's far from perfect or exactly accurate, but the goal was projecting the costs and then the potential returns of a keyword to make it as simple as possible, and using a measure of what we figured our reasonable average revenue per user would be based on an eCPM, or earnings per thousand impressions, that we thought we could get in the advertising niches that we were in for that site, and based on what our total page view count was and how many page views we could rack up, or how many ad impressions we could rack up per page view, which for that project I think we maxed out around 5. And then figuring out how, if we have to spend $30,000 to rank number 1 for this keyword, based on that keyword's approximate monthly search volume in that geographic market, and an approximation of, say, a 30% click-through rate for being in the first position for that keyword, how long will it take us for that specific keyword for us to break even? And if that break even period was less than 12 months, we went after it. We definitely didn't win on all of our keywords across the board. There's always outliers, especially in search. But for the most part, we were able to dial it in and at least make a profitable project. What's
your background prior to being at Morgan Stanley? Were you involved in science, maths? Because this algorithm, you make it sound simple, but it sounds like gold dust. It sounds incredibly complicated to actually go through all those moving parts to get the algorithm to spit out that value per keyword.
So my degree is in finance, and I specialized in portfolio management and derivatives. So there's definitely a lot of math throughout my last 2 years of college.
So this is a financial modeling derivative project, if you like.
Yeah, just figuring out what the standard deviation is for the returns and how far we can move away from what the mean return is before we would see, a positive or negative move in the carrying. And the carry was all just cash flow. And it was how much do we need to carry the company for this to maintain some positive net cash flow at the end of the payback period, and then being able to assign an approximate value to a keyword. I was definitely the guy who had the tinfoil hat on in a lot of the meetings with the investor and with some of the steering committee members, but it started to work, and we started to really see some good traction. The UGC model also is hugely scalable if you can get it right. It's one of those things I've tried in much smaller doses a couple other times in other projects, and I've never really been able to reproduce the exact same results. I think it's very, very niche specific. I don't think anybody should read that post and be like, oh, I can do this in my market. I mean, there's so many variables. Not every market has 100,000 searches per month that you can go get. Or, not every project's going to have the budget to tackle the competitors to be able to get that kind of traffic, even if it is there. I mean, it's very, very specific. It's not a blue sky where there's just endless opportunity and everybody can do it. And it's not even from people not putting in the time and the effort. It's just not every set of keywords has that potential.
But what can we take away, strip down, people listening to this who are perhaps running small to medium-sized businesses, and they're looking at keyword research in a similar way to you, but they haven't perhaps got those resources like you say. What can you take out of your model that perhaps can benefit them?
Oh, I think the process is still, not to toot my own horn, but I think the process is pretty sound. It's still the process I use today on every website I build and every project I work on. That process of taking a shotgun style approach to keyword discovery, mining all of the keywords you possibly can, prioritizing them based on volume and intent and competition, building as many pages and assets as you need to, seeing what naturally and organically bubbles up before you start any link building or any passive advertising or any traffic campaigns, and then only focusing on the keywords where you're actually seeing traffic and traction. That pumpkin hacking model I still use every single day. And I think that's probably the biggest thing.
Okay, so it's kind of like fishing with keywords for traffic. We'll get onto the pumpkin hacking bit in a moment, but just if we back up to stage 2 of your sort of central tenets of this whole model, the next stage of the system is using a bespoke algorithm to assess on-page content architecture. So could you explain a bit more about this?
I mean, the algorithm that we had built for valuation didn't really score on page. What we really did was we just pushed and pulled a whole bunch of levers on our test sites until we figured out what the content structure and content hierarchy needed to be on those pages, and how internal links had to flow upstream and downstream between parent and child directories for this specific niche and for these specific keyword patterns and modifier patterns. My favorite thing to use for scoring on page right now is that's free is probably the Alchemy API. And then, if you've got a really big budget, I really like Search Metrics content analysis tool. But those are really the only tools I can think of off the top of my head that have been built that really actually do some degree of accurate scoring for, on page and can make relatively clear and distinct recommendations.
Okay, but what were you looking for? Give me an example. You were looking through your stats and you see certain category pages that fit in with certain individual content pages that see like they could be a natural hierarchy in the SEO architecture overall.
So what we noticed as we went over, we're looking at the test sites, was that the pages that rolled up underneath the brand directories. So when we had products like again, the easiest one for me to use is Apple. When we had products that were specifically focused as topics. So like we had one topic would be an iPhone, one would be an iPad, one would be a MacBook Pro. When we had the reviews or the topics underneath them rolling up underneath the products and then the products rolling up underneath the brand, that seemed to send the most directional signaling in terms of downstream keyword authority to Google that we found. So that's the structure that we built on Toshibaco. So the brand pages are at the top of the food chain. So, all the Apple reviews roll up under Apple, and then it goes Apple, and then it goes the product name, and then it goes the specific review name. And we also found that keeping all of that content, all of the long form content, as well as having that repeated freshness of having new reviews stacking on the same topic page, and the topics again are the products, seemed to really help drive rankings. I mean, for a very long time, we ranked, numbers 2 and 3 for iPhone 5 and iPad and lots of pretty crazy terms to be ranking for, especially in Japan where they're, it's very much a mobile first community. And those, I think, were just a testament to the hierarchy that we had sort of figured out for that niche.
And how far can on-page hierarchy go in gaining those great rankings over and above when you then go on to build your links afterwards?
What I found is the best link building strategy that exists is just to be, it's a complete chicken and egg problem. But I mean, if you rank in the top 5 for a really competitive term, you're going to get links completely organically. You wouldn't believe how many people and reporters and bloggers and people who are out there building links as part of just their day-to-day job, and as a part of people who are the content creators on the internet, they just go and do Google searches to find things to link to support their point. If you're in a top ranked spot, there's going to be polarizing audiences out there that are going to want to publish something that's either black or white, and you can be on either side of the fence depending on how they want to paint it, and just being there will get you links. I wish there was something more scientific than that, but we didn't do any link building at all for the Toshibaco project. We built it and they started to come, so we continued to build it, and we just tried to grow our keyword set and continue to make modifications, did a crap ton of split testing to work on actually getting the reviews, which was our main conversion point, and links just came. We just got written about, we got included in press roundups. It just sort of happened as a byproduct of ranking. In spite of ourselves, we got links that helped our rankings rank better.
It's interesting because on a much smaller scale, that's what I found happening, especially over the last 6 to 12 months. It's a very interesting process, as is pumpkin hacking. It's a great name. I don't think you can take credit for the name. You can take credit for using this strategy to get some amazing results. Can you talk a bit about this? How does it work?
The term comes from pumpkin farmers. There's plenty of pumpkin farmers out there that want to grow as many frickin' pumpkins as they can because they're basing their returns or whatever their business goals are, or their farming goals, whatever it is, are based on how many pumpkins they can possibly grow. Then there's another school of pumpkin growers that just want to grow a 1,000-pound pumpkin. I mean, this is a pumpkin the size of a car. And what it comes down to, and start at the end and then I'll back my way into it, is, if you've got 2 850-pound pumpkins, or you have an 850-pound pumpkin, I should say, and an 865-pound pumpkin, if you're going to get one to 1,000 pounds, you have to cut the head off the 850-pound pumpkin because you're not going to have the resources, you're not going to have the nutrients and the water and the sunlight and the soil spread, that you're not going to have the resources you need to get that 865-pound pumpkin to a 1,000-pound pumpkin. So you have to be willing to do that. That focus is what pumpkin hacking is about, is you plant, a field of pumpkins, and 10 of them grow bigger than all the rest of them, so you kill all the rest of them, and you focus on those 10. 4 of those get bigger than the rest. You cut the other 6 short, cut their life so the resources feed into 4. Of those 4, 3 grow bigger, then 2 grow bigger, then you finally have a champion. The exact same can be said from SEO. You spread yourself very thin in terms of your go-to-market keywords. You create everything equally, the same architecture, no links. Look at your analytics, keep your finger on the pulse of the traffic and figure out what's working. And everything that's not working, you deprecate it. Redirect them back to the parent category or parent subcategory, or kill the page altogether if it doesn't have any contextual parent that is relevant for where that page should be redirected to. Focus all of your energy into the pages that are working. And if you have 6 pages and 3 of them are getting twice the amount of traffic, and you really want to get one of those pages to rank for a head term and get all the traffic for it, then you have to kill those other 3 pages. It's very, very hard for people to do. They see pages getting traffic and most people won't fold them in to focus on the bigger picture.
Well, that's something I wanted to ask you. I mean, what is the cutoff point? Is there a proportion per the amount of traffic you're getting overall within a specific category or within a specific channel or hierarchy where you say, okay, that one's not a winner, that's a dud, we're going to get rid of that? Because you don't want to be cutting off your nose or your pumpkin to spite your face.
The crappy but honest answer is no. I mean, there's not really a threshold. It's going to be different. It's so subjective to the project and the project goals specifically. If the project is purely traffic, which I would only assume means you're on a CPM model, there's other heuristics you'd have to take into account. Are those other traffic from other pages that you might want to cut off? Are they creating more page views? Are they creating more earnings? Are they receiving more links? Like, it's too subjective to make like a broad blanket statement about it.
But can you do 301 redirects, or do you just cut them completely?
That totally depends on the contextual relevance. If all of your categories are in the same wheelhouse and you want to fold 3 into 3 others and there's contextual relevance there, like let's say your whole site's about house building and you're talking about residential and they're all residential categories, sure, 301 them. Save that link juice, save that content relevancy, absorb any rankings that they might have had. But if your site's about property in general and you've got a category in residential and a category in commercial and a category in industrial, and you decide that you're going to chop off the industrial category, folding those industrial pages and the industrial contextual relevancy into your commercial and residential pages could hurt you probably more than it helps you. So very content specific.
Okay, so this is something again that for people listening who aren't getting 100,000 organic visits a month, which is probably most people, this is something with lower traffic levels, 10, 20,000 a month, that you should be doing anyway. You should be looking at that on-page hierarchy and you should be cutting the dead wood.
You're listening to the Content Champion Podcast, showcasing the best content marketing strategies across the web.
We're back with Nick Eubanks. Now, the aim was to build traffic levels to 100,000 per month in a year, but as we mentioned, you did this in 9 months. And I think the traffic started growing on this project very quickly, didn't it? Which must have been pretty impressive from your point of view.
It really wasn't that impressive, to be honest. I mean, if you've got, our keyword database was huge. The keyword list we put together was huge, and we used a database-driven model to spin up all these pages. We scraped a lot of the initial content that we used. If you have 50,000 pages on your website, 2 visits to each page per month gets you to 100,000 visits. There is a volume approach that, can be spoken to here. We just went after super easy keywords. We went after ones that didn't have high volume. These keywords could have 10 searches a month. Just by putting the page up for it, we were going to have the most relevant result, and we were going to rank number 1 for it. So we're going to get 3 or 4 of those 10 visits every month.
Okay, so I guess from a smaller blogging perspective, people with smaller sites doing SEO, their version of that could be get all these keywords ready, put some long tails into specific posts and just grow it out organically like that, because ultimately the same thing will happen.
Yeah, feed from the bottom. I think people get really fixated. A lot of people I talk to get really fixated on these either vanity terms or these huge traffic terms. I want to rank for this term that has 200,000 searches per month. That's not going to happen. It's just not. You're an individual blogger starting a new blog, competing with 10 sites that are 10 years old each that have full-time staffs and $50,000 per month marketing budgets. It's not going to happen. Like my last post on my blog about realistic SEO, and specifically the concept is called rank potential, is like that post came out of like endless rants that I've gone on over the past 3 or 4 years since I wrote that 100,000 visit post. And just like, you got to get realistic for like what your project is and the space that you're in.
Okay, let's touch on some more stuff because we've got a lot to go through. You mentioned that you've built the platform yourself. What did the hosting, what did it being a Japanese site, things like that, how did that factor into the SEO perspective?
We learned some tough lessons. running a Japanese-based business from the US is hard. I have native translators here. I had translators around the world. Everything is done by wire transfer. I have to pay a wire transfer fee from my US bank to the Japanese bank, and then pay the Japanese bank a wire transfer fee to get it to the vendor. You need dedicated representatives to push paper and actually get stuff done over there. Identifying and getting in contact with hosting companies was a complete pain in the ass. Super hard to find hosting over there. I mean, at this point, you can spin up, now AWS is commoditized enough and consumer friendly enough. You can spin up an AWS instance and plop it down in Tokyo and it's no issue. But back then it was, we tried a couple different hosts. And ultimately, we got featured on Yahoo Japan's homepage and crashed after I think we got 32,000 visits one day. At that point, realized we had to find a better solution. So that's when we actually moved over to AWS, and it was a very big headache back in 2000. I think it was the very beginning of 2012. It was still kind of a pain in the ass to really spin up EC2 instances effectively. So there's a lot of learning and a lot of screw ups.
And we're talking AWS, Amazon Web Services.
It's a great solution if you have the money. Most people don't need that. Most of my WordPress sites are on WP Engine. My little BS testing sites, I use WebFaction and DigitalOcean. Liquid Web's a good solution. I mean, there's a bunch out there. I would just say, if you do have any aspirations for being serious, I would probably stay off of GoDaddy's shared hosting. I would stay off of Bluehost. There's a lot of really crappy web hosts out there, and hosting's important, so don't go cheap.
I've got to give a plug for Traffic Planet hosting, which is what Content Champion's on. That's fantastic as well. So
yeah, Terry Kyle's done a nice job with his infrastructure over there.
Let's go back and look at this project. We're talking about your post, How to Grow a New Website to Over 100,000 Organic Visits per Month, from your blog, SEO Nick. What surprised me most about what we're talking about here is that it's repeatable. So did you factor that in? Did you say, okay, we're going to build a model that's repeatable, or did it kind of happen as a byproduct of the process?
No, the investor really forced us to think about how could we do this again the whole time we were doing it. And it actually slowed a lot of progress initially, but I mean, it made up for itself in a ton later on. The real trick though was, can we build something again that's repeatable, but within this niche? I think there's definitely unicorn success stories that aren't going to be as repeatable in other niches. Like if your niche is very obscure, let's say you're selling clown noses, and you've done a piece on, the 10 best clown noses for whatever the value adds are that you have to sell a clown nose against, and you're able to get a massive pop in press from some video or some big demonstration piece or some event that you do or some stunt. Repeating that is probably going to be very difficult. Not impossible, but difficult. If you start doing that, using the process though, and you start doing your keyword research the right way the first time, and learning and documenting what you see working and what you don't in terms of content types for a niche and keywords within a niche, the learning that you're going to take from doing it the first time, you're going to probably have to do it a couple times. But anybody can use this process a couple times, and you put the time in, put the work in, and you'll get to a place where you understand what niche you need to be focused on, what keywords you need to be focused on to get to, if your magic number is 100,000 visits per month, to get there. I think that is a very real and very achievable number. Again, when I say niche, I don't mean a hyper niche. Urban gardening is a niche where you can absolutely get traffic that size. Urban gardening for blueberry bushes on a wooden deck is probably too much of a hyper niche, and that traffic potential is just not going to be there.
Oh, crap. I'm going to have to shut down my Clown Noses website after this call now. Okay, where are you going to take this SEO model? I was going to ask you as well if we could buy into the algorithm that you've programmed, but that's another thing.
Well, it's available. I mean, if you do a Google search for SEO business model, my keyword opportunity model post ranks, I think it's still number one. I put a simplified version of that model into a Google sheet that anybody can go download.
Okay, brilliant. So I guess if you can create floods of traffic at will, we've mentioned Apple already. You're going to be buying some office space in Cupertino very shortly, next door to Apple, because surely you're going to be a multimillionaire doing this type of thing over and over again.
I'm using it to build e-commerce businesses at this point. The big difference between the businesses that I'm trying to build at this point in my life versus what I think a lot of other people in the SEO industry are doing is I'm not an affiliate and we're not drop shipping. We've got 3 distribution centers and 36 employees, and we hold a couple $1 million in inventory, and we're trying to build a real business.
Well, it all sounds very exciting, and this has been a fascinating conversation. So before the PS question, can you remind us all where we can find you online, please?
Sure, yeah. So if you go to seonick.net/blog, On the blog homepage, there's a list of my most popular posts in the sidebar on the right-hand side. If you scroll down, all of my posts related to using specifically keyword models to build out and assess the opportunity in vertical markets are like most of my popular posts. So my how to do keyword research post is still one of the biggest entry points in the site. My 100,000 visits post makes up about 20% of my traffic every month still. And then my post on rank potential listed there, my post on SEO for e-commerce, my post on how to build a keyword matrix, which is once you have that giant list of keywords that I talk about in my 100,000 visits post, it actually gives you a step-by-step plan for like how to build an Excel sheet to make sense of all of it, because nobody knows what to do with 50,000 keywords.
Wait for it, listeners. Here comes the PS question.
Could you please share one advanced SEO strategy that we can use right after the show?
Yeah, create a product and name it after one of your biggest target or priority keywords. You get baked in anchor text that way. You're not using commercialized anchor text, you're using brand anchor text because the name of your product includes the keyword you're going after, so it removes the risk from over-optimized anchor text. It's the name of your product. I mean, look at the name of my business. It's Traffic Safety Store. It has two of our main focus keywords in the name of it. So every time we go out and we build a branded link for it, Traffic Safety Store, it has two of our core keywords right in the name.
Well, that's a fantastic piece of advice and a really fascinating call. As I said, everything you're doing is really exciting. You know, from this side of the pond, I wish you all the best with everything in future, Nick. So thank you very much.
Great being here. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to the Content Champion podcast, available at contentchampion.com, Stitcher, Zune, the BlackBerry Network, and on iTunes. Until next time, thanks for listening.